leaders. Hi, it's Chris. If you're watching this video, you're one of the middle school leaders who wasn't able to be here last Sunday night when we had our family ministry gathering night. But I didn't want you not being able to be here to be the reason why I couldn't share at least a couple of things with you that are really important for you to know before we get started in ministry this year. 2012 and 2013 are going to be years in middle school ministry, or a year in middle school ministry where a lot of changes are going to be taking place. And so we've set up ministry around those changes, and some of you are a big part of that with some new teams that have been formed, which is really, really exciting to me. And so something else that I shared with the leaders on Sunday is that working with middle schoolers, it's a unique beast at times. And at the beginning of the training on Sunday, I had everybody raise their hand and take what I call the middle school ministry pledge, where you swear before God and these witnesses that you are volunteering to work with middle schoolers, and that people will think you're crazy. Many people won't understand you, that middle school ministry is the ministry of extreme grace and fifth chances and awkward bodies and strange smells and all of these things, because so much is changing. But I love it. I love being a part of these years where so much is up for grabs. Their spirituality, their attention, the way that they think. And I want to be involved in that process of change so that the paths that their brain are forming in terms of attitudes and behaviors they'll have as an adult, I want to be involved in that process of formation, because we have good answers. The world will give them bad answers, which can lead to bad habits and bad behaviors later in life. I want to be part of the conversation and lead them towards good answers. But I want to show you 3 pictures that I think encapsulate what middle school ministry can sometimes feel like. All right, I'm going to do a series of XY graphs to help explain this. So here's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. Over here on this graph, you know, we sometimes think that when we come to church, most good Christians have a spiritual life that looks a lot like this. That it's a constantly going up, they're always growing closer to God, and it's always moving in that direction. And we compare ourselves to other people and go, oh, they've got it all together. I wish I was more like them. But the reality is, if we talk to them, their spiritual life or their relationship with God as adults probably looks something more like this. And maybe that's what your graph looks like. Now, in a middle schooler, the graph looks a little bit something like this. And that's just by lunchtime on Monday, right? Middle schoolers have so much changing emotionally, spiritually, physically, physiologically in their brains. And so one moment to the next they can change drastically, which is why in middle school ministry we have to keep that in mind. We have to remember that middle school ministry means the kid that we loved 5 minutes ago may not be the kid who is totally different right now. It's a ministry where we just have to have grace after grace after grace. And it's a ministry where, and I tell leaders this every year, it's a ministry where we do a lot of sowing, but we don't always get to see what is reaped from that sowing. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with investing, with not always seeing the return on your investment. But trust me when I say that there is a return. And then when it does stick, it is a beautiful thing. All right, you'll notice something around my neck. Every leader in middle school ministry is going to have an orange lanyard that looks like this. And on that lanyard is going to be a name badge. And so everybody on Sunday when they came, they got their picture taken, and they have a laminated name badge with a picture on it. And so for all of you who weren't there, when you show up for your first night of ministry, whether that's on a Saturday night or a Wednesday night or something else, we'll take your picture and we'll get you one just like this. Because we're going to be increasing the security in base camp, which is why I have this new team of cafe hosts that are going to be present on Saturday nights. So that whenever middle school ministry is going on in base camp, the only adults that should be in the room are those who have an orange lanyard. The only exception to that would be if somebody is being escorted on a tour by our hallway hosts, which wear the red t-shirts. But I want parents to know that whenever they see an orange lanyard, that means three things. I know the person, they've been background checked, and they can answer basic questions about ministry. You'll have one of these, and there's going to be a rack in a closet here in base camp where you can keep that so you don't have to take it home and then risk losing it or forgetting it the night that you have ministry. All right, one more thing that I want to share with you is we also went through our protection and abuse prevention policy. Now, we take protecting our minors very seriously. And all of you, as a part of becoming a leader, whether you're in high school or an adult, go through a background check process. Then annually, we have training that reiterates some of the main points. So for some of you, you've been through background check process already, which happens every 2 years. And so this is just a refresher for you. For some of you, you have not been through a background check. And so you would have probably received an email already from our student ministry assistant, Megan Mastenbrook, telling you to fill out a background check form. That begins that process. But then on top of that is this training that reiterates some of the key points that go along with the abuse prevention policy. And so I'm going to go over a couple of those just to make sure that we're clear on some very key points that are in this policy. So probably no surprise, but our general purpose statement is that Cornerstone has a zero tolerance for abuse in its programs and ministry activities. And it's the responsibility of every staff and volunteer to act in the best interest of all children in every program. Another very important section of this policy pertains to what to do if a student shares with you something that is concerning. And what you're looking for are signs of physical or emotional or sexual abuse. And if a student says anything like that to you, we call that a disclosure. And what you need to know is what to do next. And it's pretty simple. Tell me. And then we'll determine next steps. And so what this goes through is how to contact each of the ministry directors. So for those working with Beth Ann, her contact information, those working with me, my contact information, etc. And one thing very important about this, and not all of you are in a small group setting where this is going to happen. Some of you in a small group setting, this is more likely to happen, where a student would share something. Now, our natural tendency as curious leaders is going to be to ask them more about what they've just said. And this is where I need you to pay very close attention, because in talking with attorneys who have prosecuted child abuse cases, that is the absolute worst thing that you can do. Because you can actually impair a case by asking leading questions, which then create more difficulty in the authorities trying to figure out what's true and what's false. And it could just be an innocent question about what? You said that your dad did this, tell me more about that. When maybe he or she didn't mean dad, they meant uncle, and now the story is a little bit confused. And so immediately when a student would share with you something that you consider a disclosable event, just listen well and then talk to me immediately. And we will figure out what to do next. Okay? A couple other things that are very important. There are lists of permitted and prohibited contact in our policy, which will be attached to the email that I send out. Permitted contact includes appropriately holding and comforting a person, an occasional hug or embrace, especially when initiated by the person, sharing emotional or spiritual concerns, providing necessary medical care and attention. Prohibited contact is going to be a list of things that should be no surprise, including abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, sexual exploitation, harassment, or molestation, disseminating, exhibiting, or displaying sexually explicit materials, privately exchanging gifts, phone calls, emails, letters, text messages that is perceived as intimate in nature, and that's very serious. We need to pay close attention to that. I have a colleague who was recently, let go from his job because emails and text messages that he was sending with a student out of context were extremely inappropriate. And so he was let go, and he was a great leader, but he took things a little too far in that kind of communication, and so we've got to be very careful with that. No hitting, kicking, slapping, shaking, or shoving, even though you might want to at times. Let's avoid those things. No swearing or using obscene or foul or sexually explicit language. No demonstration of any romantic or sexual interest in a student. and obviously no kissing or extended inappropriate hugging or embracing. And I know it seems strange to have to say those things, but we have to say those things so that we know what is allowable and what is not. And again, those are in the policy. I'm just kind of going through that. Now, guidelines for private counseling. This is something that might come up where a student wants to talk to you one-on-one. It comes down to a pretty simple rule, and that is never alone. You should never be alone in a private room that has no windows or outside access with a student. Whenever I'm counseling a student, I always make sure that it's in a room that has lots of glass. Or I'm in a room and the door is open slightly. Maybe we're off to the side speaking so it's not heard outside, but just keep that in mind, never alone. That goes for driving or here inside of the building. Another thing that we take very seriously is that other than at my level, no volunteers should be in an opposite gender counseling situation. In other words, a man should not be speaking to a young woman in a counseling situation and vice versa. And the only time that is permissible is at mine and Betsy's level, when it's deemed that the relationship that I might have with a young lady because of her knowing me well, that might be most beneficial for her to talk to me, but only at the director level. And again, following all the other rules around private counseling and making sure that, you know, the room has windows and things along those lines. A couple of things that I also want to make sure you know is what things are you required to tell me? And there are a list of things that if you hear a student say certain things that you need to come to me immediately. So the following is a short list of areas that must be immediately communicated to me if disclosed during a student meeting. Illegal behavior, like I said before, physical harm or abuse to themselves or to another person, cutting, self-injury, suicidal comments, addictions like drugs, alcohol, or pornography, and any issues with homosexuality or same-sex relationships. If a student talks about any of those things as issues that they're having, you need to come to me so that we can figure out what to do next. Examples of areas that do not necessarily need to be spoken about with me include fighting or issues with parents or friends, happens all the time, pressure at school, non-harmful boyfriend or girlfriend issues, or normal faith issues. I would expect you just to talk through those things with your students. And those are the main areas that I wanted to cover in this policy. Again, it'll be attached to the email. What I'll need is a response from that email stating that you have watched the video and that you have a copy of the policy and that you've got all your questions answered, at least for the time being. I just want to welcome all of you to middle school ministry for 2012 and 2013. It's going to be a fantastic year, and I'm so happy, especially for those of you who are joining us for the first time. I'm excited for the experiences that you'll have, and please look for more little videos like this to keep you updated on things that are going on, because it's so hard to get us all together. So again, welcome, and let's have a great year.